Hello and welcome to No Brands Land. My name is Ashley Rodriguez, and this is episode 1, just a quick introduction on who I am and why I am starting this podcast among the sea of podcasts. Now, I'm specifically creating this channel because I want to give a voice to every single person who has ever tried to start a business or questioned their value in the workplace. This is a channel dedicated to questioning the norms around what we do for business in our workplace culture, which has been in place now for just under 100 years. So it's going to be a fun chat every single week on all things business. I do get into marketing on here, but we're specifically looking at the aspects of humanizing business. So I'm not here to tell you how to market this, how to operate your business like that. I'm just simply here to have open conversation, to share my own humanity, my struggles, my doubts, my successes in the world of business, and more specifically, my observations in the world of business. I have been graced with a gift to be able to see different patterns emerging on a small scale and being able to then take a step back and see how that impacts us in similar or same ways on a larger scale. And it has been absolutely just mind-blowing for me. So, as a context to what I'm speaking on, I have been in marketing for 12 years now, going over that. And I've been in business since I was 19. I had my first business when I was 19. And it has changed so much of my life and how I see entrepreneurship and creatorship. I, for some reason, just keep going back to entrepreneurship. I just cannot help myself. I've been in contracting. I've gone back and forth with my own brands and back into the workforce. And it's just been a very interesting journey for me. But I do feel that that is the case for many my age or in my peer group who are also in entrepreneurship. So it's just been a fun way to see everything evolve. Now, with this podcast, I'm not going to over edit or do anything like that to clip and cut. I really just want to show up and just be myself. And I hope that that is emulated through each episode. But what I really wanted to speak on today is where I come from and why I've gained momentum in this field specifically. I am finishing my master's in IO psychology. So that is specifically focused on workplace health and well-being. And what that is essentially, it's a really rapidly growing field of social science. So it's industrial organizational psychology. And companies are increasingly hiring people like myself to consult their company and their leadership team on ways to improve the workforce or ways to improve workplace culture, how to help their establish their environment so that employees are more motivated, that it's a thriving workplace culture. Because ultimately, there are two reasons going into these consultative sessions or when somebody is looking to hire somebody like myself, an IO psychologist. Either they want to improve productivity to increase output or reduce profit loss, or they genuinely are concerned about their workplace culture. Maybe they are a fast developing tech company and the workplace is just burned out and overwhelmed. And so that's obviously going to hinder the process of them making more revenue, but also they really genuinely care about their workplace. So those are the two concepts that I've seen, especially through some of my studies, where there might be a need for a third-party consultative service to just come in and help. Now, IO psychologists can also help with HR aspects and managing, people and operations of the people in general in a business or in a company. But it really just depends. The needs vary from company to company. So this journey for me started when I guess it started when I started working. which most of us was in our mid to late teens. I started working at the age of 15, and I do come from parents who were raised by a generation of hard workers. They often don't question what they're doing or why. It was just kind of get things done and just make it happen. And I'm in the process of writing a book right now. It will be published hopefully before the new year. It's something that I've been working on and off for so long, which is why I'm launching this podcast at the time that I'm launching it. But it's a book on just understanding the history of our work culture and where everything began and why. Why was the 40-hour work week put in place in the first place? What kind of society did we have back then? But also really highlighting the really important signals that we're getting today for why that no longer works for us. And it honestly just kind of blows my mind a little bit that we question everything we've done, right? Like, we understand that there's a diversity of people, there's a diversity of culture, there's a diversity of family life, there's a diversity of personalities. Like, there's such a diversity in everything that we do. And it's so bizarre to me that we don't translate that to also the business world and a diversity of working needs. And so right now, as I speak, there is a 32-hour work week act that was proposed last year in 2023. And it was proposed from the House. And it basically is aiming to establish a 32-hour work week where employees and teams get the same benefits that they currently get at a 40-hour work week. But then there's also incentives for being paid overtime past an 8-hour work day. And the bill hasn't gotten a lot of traction. It's gotten some, but mostly I would say that there's probably just not a lot of conversation around it, and it's starting to happen. So I just checked back on the bill this past week, and another representative had put their backing behind this act very recently. And so what I've been doing is now getting in the online space and trying to encourage people to just reach out to their representatives and express their support for this act or others like it, where we can effectively begin to make the shift from a 40-hour work week, federally regulated, to a 32-hour or less. Now, I am covering all of this kind of stuff in my book. I have so many resources, especially as I finish up my master's. I've just had an amazing amount of access to studies and research that has been done on burnout in the workplace. And what really interested me about this, before I go right back into my history and how I got started, what really interested me in maybe I need some water. What interested me, I still don't feel like that's right. Why does that sound so bizarre to my brain? Anyways, why I became interested in going and exploring more research behind this and actually starting to see what's out there floating in the ether was I noticed a lot of these studies were done around the medical industry. And many of these studies are recent. There are some that are many years ago. But to understand that there was a real burnout fatigue, a real mental fatigue happening in the medical field where people's lives are on the line, I just thought that was interesting that there's not more conversation around this. And we've seen so many medical professionals just completely leave the industry. And my question is why? I understand the burnout. I understand that the structure needs to change, but why is there no conversation around how we can change the structure? Because I just have to say, I have to advocate that there cannot be a dismissal. There can't be a dismissal of the opportunity here. It should be a how can we do this? Not a we can't. It's how can we do this? How can we look to implement a 3 or 5 year plan as a business to make these shifts? So I currently work for myself. I work about 3 hours a day. I work with my team 3 hours a day because my goal is to actually put this into practice. and several years down the road be able to showcase that this is possible, and that every industry is so uniquely different that they will need their own business models and business plans as well, but that it is possible, and we can start the conversation that way. We can immediately get rid of the dismissal by showing that it is possible. And because I'm so passionate about this, and I'm such an advocate for the change in workplace culture in regard to this, I'm doing it myself, with my own team, with myself. You can see in the back there, I have a sign that says all progress is good progress. So I'll have to explain that one in just a little bit, and how that contributes to all of this. But going back to where my inspirations came from. So I started working at 15, and I am now about to pass year 30 officially. And I started realizing that I'd never officially took a vacation, like never officially took a legitimate breakaway vacation or sabbatical, which sabbatical I really, really advocate for over a vacation. And I'll get more into that in just a little bit. But I realized that I never really took the time off of work. And I came from my early years with this kind of hustle mentality. I was in the military, so it was very like driven by work. A lot of my value was tied to my productivity and my contributions and my work ethic. And so I started to realize, like, well, why haven't I? And why haven't I, even though I've been in the business industry, why hasn't anybody really began the conversations or struck the conversations around sabbaticals or like official time off? And this came into play because I this year decided to take 6 months off of work because I was feeling so burned out. I was feeling so stressed, and I was working with a dream client of mine who to this day I still have so much love for, but unfortunately I did burn that bridge as much as I probably could have avoided that. I waited until the last second, and I just completely unraveled. And that was with some of my own health issues as well, and how my body regulates and manages energy in my cells and all of that fun stuff. So it's multi-layered here, but yeah, 15 years of being in the workforce, and I'd never truly taken a vacation or a sabbatical to get into some self-development and personal development. Now, this really started when I joined the military, and I was in my early 20s. And because of some of the toxic environments that I was in regard to leadership and personality types, I started developing what I thought at first was just a passion for communication in the workplace. And so you'll notice if you see any of my previous podcasts that I did years ago, it was really focused on communication in the workplace and leadership styles and things of that nature. And my initial degree was in communication. So I really thought I was going down that route. And I think that is what opened the door for me to kind of get into psychology more and understanding, well, yes, communication is what happens. It is the act of communicating, and there are different styles to that, but there's something driving that even deeper, which is in our brains. It's the psychology. And eventually I hope to get into neuroscience. So it's going to be a lot of fun for me. This is just the beginning. And it was tough. I thoroughly enjoyed my experience, but there were some really dark moments for me. And it allowed me to explore another position, another angle, where instead of wondering, am I not capable? Am I not able to just keep up with the world of business or with the demands being placed on me? Is there something wrong with me? If you're working and you feel like you're at your wit's end, or you have a business and you just feel like you're not getting through that glass ceiling, that you're constantly stopping or getting stopped, or just not competing at the level that you want to. Excuse me. It's most likely because you're experiencing burnout. So it's not that you're not capable. And I realized this coming off of that 6-month break. It's not that we're not capable. We're very capable. but we're not listening to the signs and the signals that our body is giving us. We're not listening to the warning signs. We're not tuning in. We're not getting grounded. And we're starting to see that now. There's been a huge revolution, a spiritual personal development revolution happening the last few years. And there's a reason for it, because the chronic stress and the chronic fatigue, the mental fatigue that we've experienced over decades and decades, over quite literally generations, is surfacing. And there is a craving for something more meaningful than what we've done the last 100 years. And it is tough. We're going against some massive giants here in the business world who are not going to be on board with stuff like this unless it's to support their bottom line. But it's necessary, I think, for positively affecting our society. And my book goes into that quite a bit, the psychology of what's happening on a bigger scale. So I mentioned very early in this introduction that when we look at some of the smaller patterns, when we look at burnout and mental fatigue and lowered performance, more time off, things like that, we can see on a bigger level this massive pattern that's happening because the individuals who are sitting left and right of you at work or across the computer screen, if you're virtual, the individuals that you're working with, they are people in our societies, in our local societies, in our national societies, in our global societies. And what does that do when that stress is spilling over? It completely impacts the way that we show up to our families, the way that we show up for our neighbors and our friends or for strangers on the street. To think that we can check these things at the door and just plug away and work and then leave and we're not impacted, it defies all data that is coming out currently and that has been coming out for many years. In this book, I think I have it pulled up right now, I have more than 20 different scholarly resources because it's drilled into my head for my master's degree. I have so many resources on this. And what really just infuriates me on such a passionate level is that despite the studies that have already come out and that are continuing to come out, there's not a widespread conversation on this. We're talking about mental health crisis happening everywhere. And there are so many individuals that are attributing that to social media and technology, which, yes, it plays a role. It does play a role. It is one factor. But nobody is talking about the fact that our workplace culture, the way we do business 5 days a week, 9 to 5, might be impacting that mental health crisis. And in fact, studies are showing that it does. Then we look a little bit deeper. So not only does stress in the workplace contribute to how people poorly interact with each other in the real world, but now it's impacting future generations. And we know this because we've been raised by generations who had to work multiple jobs and who were always gone. And that is being perpetuated today with double working households where they need to both work to contribute to the household if they're even like happy. What is the word I'm looking for? Goodness. If they're even fortunate enough. That is where we're going with this, friends. If they're fortunate enough to have more than one contributing income to the household. That's what we need to talk about. If they're fortunate enough to have more than one person contributing to the household, it's just wild to me. It's wild to me that we are impacting future generations in this way. So what happens? Like, these are my questions, right? As I dig into my psychology degree and I really focus on studies and I really look forward to my doctorate and the dissertations that I really truly want to get into because they matter to me and I believe could matter to the world. What does that look like? We have parents who are in survival mode, trying to provide for their families. We have teachers that are stressed and they're in survival mode, trying to help support parents because children are just all over the place, and they're getting mad at parents because parents aren't showing up to be more supportive, but the parents are at their wits' end. They're working 1, 2, 3 jobs. That's not everybody's story, but it's many. It's many of their stories. And what does that do then to the future generations that we are raising right now? It's going to create more adults in the future who are stressed and anxious and depressed, disconnected. And the answer is really simple. And it didn't become simple to me until I took my 6 months off. When I took that 6 months off, it was hard. And it was hard because I was going against myself, fighting my own brain, the need to work. Oh, I need to be productive. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I could be doing that. And once I got through that initial phase of I need to do, I need to check off my lists, I need to be productive or else I'm going to fade away into the ether. I'm not going to be productive. I'm not going to make money. I had to overcome all of these challenges in my head. And once I finally did that, I got to a place where I was okay just sitting and being, and I got to explore a little bit more of my marriage, my relationship with my children. I was able to explore my relationship with myself. Having that time away with no responsibilities to go back to because I completely got rid of all of my contracts, more or less. It allowed me the opportunity to just exist and to really go deep within myself and figure out what it is that I want to do. How do I want to contribute? How do I want to show up each day? I went from being stressful to be around and easily irritated to calm, more humble, more appreciative, more happy. And the answer was so simple. It was time off. It was time away from responsibility. I'm still a parent, so I didn't lose all responsibility, right? But my point is I didn't have to show up and perform. For 6 months, I was able to just exist. I was able to read more books. I was able to listen to more podcasts. And yes, we can do that in our day-to-day. Of course we can. But the point is I needed that time to decompress. And that is coming off of what I mentioned earlier, having started working when I was only 15, which at the time I loved. I loved the ability and the opportunity to be able to do that and make my own money that young. But over a decade into this, now realizing that I need income to provide for my family, it becomes a burden, right? It becomes a burden. So there are so many conversations to be had here on this channel. My goal, if it hasn't been obvious already, is to humanize business and marketing. And I want to step away from perpetuating all of the conditioning that we've had around business and work and how things should be done. And I want to be curious. I want all of us to be curious about the opportunity to create something different. When we realize that almost 100 years ago, these regulations were put in place by people who are no longer around, it allows us the opportunity to take a breath and to refocus our advocacy on making changes, realizing that we don't have to continue to do this just because a regulation was put in place almost 100 years ago. That is the power of the society that we live in. If we truly want to change something, we can advocate for it. We can propose legislation, which has already been done as of last year. We get to be the tipping point. And as you'll see in my book, this has already been done. They had a challenge to get to the 40-hour work week, and it involved all kinds of labor unions at the time, which now obviously our workforce looks a little bit different, but they had to fight for it. If you can believe that, they had to fight for a 40-hour work week. Well, how's that different now? Now we have technology. Everything is faster. Everything is more connected. We can automate. There's AI. There's all kinds of things in place so that we don't have to continue working in the way that we have for the last 100 years. There is an opportunity, a very unique opportunity for us to change how we do things and what we put our focus on. We can create more jobs around meaningful work, like local ecosystems, local growing houses, local community initiatives. And the reality is, if I'm very honest and truthful, the reality is our society today was not built off of where we're heading, which means that there are going to be disruptions. There is going to need to be a years-long plan, 3, 5+ years, to switch and to move into a transition phase where we can really achieve this. And my ultimate goal is to have such an impact on the industry in the near future where my children don't feel like they're forced to work to survive. They can actually pursue jobs and roles that they are passionate about, that align with them, that support their personal growth and spiritual development, whatever that may look like for them at that time. And so I invite you to join me. I appreciate you hanging out for this rant if you're still here, almost 30 minutes later, but it's such a accumulation of so many generations and observations of today that we have so much to look forward to, so much to talk about. And if you're just looking for a little bit of encouragement, if you're feeling like you're at your wit's end, or you're an entrepreneur and you've accidentally perpetuated the same mindsets, because believe it or not, with the studies I've been doing, most entrepreneurs are not super open to the idea of less hours because it's not the most cost-effective option. So again, we see the systemic push for this imbalance of work life. And unfortunately, many entrepreneurs leave the workforce because they want more freedom. And then they impose the same restrictions and the same lack of freedoms on their own people. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing, which is why I make a conscious effort to retrain my brain and look for the how, to get curious and look for the how, instead of dismissing the opportunity for change. If you're still here, I invite you to check out my website, look at my socials. Everything that I have in the online ether will continue to grow because I am just starting. I'm finally emerging from behind the scenes and getting more into sharing my observations, my opinions, my thoughts on everything business, marketing, psychology. I'm just loving it. I'm eating it up. Loving it so much because it's just so validating. And it finally allowed me the opportunity to stop looking at myself as the problem and realizing that the problems I was experiencing were manifestations, consequences of a lifelong of burnout and fatigue. So I'm here for it. And I hope that you are too. Stick around. If you love this, please subscribe to my channel, give a follow. I mean, it's so important to me. It's free to do. It's the best way that you can support all of this information coming to light. And if you do stick around, you'll know exactly when I publish this book going into the new year. I will be using this book as a resource for all of the conversations that I'll be having and podcast episodes that I'll be doing, speaking. I am moving into the philanthropic part of my career, so more speaking and just sharing the good news, which is things are changing. Welcome to it. And I will see you on the other side.